half-peeled white paint, and it shuddered a little. Maybe it was structurally unsound. Maybe one day I'd balance myself on it to yell bitter insults at pregnant passers-by, lose my footing and plummet to the sidewalk below, smashing into 1,000 red watermelon pieces. Everyone who currently hated me would have to come to the funeral, and in death I'd be absolved of my sins. People would leave trite messages on my social media pages. "Gone too soon. Fly high, little bird." A little insensitive for someone who ended their life in pieces at the bottom of a tall building, but still. They'd memorialize my LinkedIn page. My mother's small-town friends, the type who get a grief boner every time someone dies and gives them something to talk about over dinner, would send her flowers for weeks. She'd find a new spot for each bouquet and tell my sister the house had never looked better. As I stood there contemplating the details of my own funeral with some satisfaction, another gust of wind displaced some papers on top of the unpacked boxes in the living room, and I decided today was too cold for my untimely demise. I braced my foot and pulled the stiff sliding door closed behind me. My friend Ellie had promised to come over the next day and help me to screw the various parts of the easy assembly bed together. There was no point trying on my own. I lacked a sense of coordination and couldn't even ride a bike until I was 17. Ellie, on the other hand, was my pragmatic counterpart, the yin to my yang. She knew a Phillips screwdriver from a flathead and a fuckboy from a marriageable man. That's why we'd stayed friends for so long. If I did meet my maker falling over the balcony while yelling insults at pregnant women, Ellie would turn up at the funeral and say something magnanimous yet unapologetically honest, like, "Natasha was my best friend and a shining star, and she died doing what she loved, making other people feel bad to avoid addressing her own insecurities." The gathered masses would nod and agree, respectfully and mournfully, that I really should have done more therapy. So, no bed frame tonight. I flipped my new mattress off the side of the bedroom wall, where the movers had left it, grabbed a sheet from a box marked linens, then pulled out a thin comforter my husband and I had never used because he hated it. It had an aggressively fecund-looking purple flower print. Now that I saw it through different eyes, removed from the joking context of my marriage, "Honestly, I love it," I'd said to Joe, as he went on a comedic rant about its demerits. I realized I hated it too. My phone lit up with an incoming call while I was crouched by one corner of the mattress, attempting to pull the sheet taut. Mom, the only person who called me these days. I picked up and paced around the darkening apartment as I told her about how great the place seemed, how easy the move was, how well I was doing. She wanted to make sure I was still planning to visit. "So we can keep an eye on your mental health," she reminded me brightly. I imagined her sitting in her living room in Nantucket, eyes on the deck, perhaps an early deer nibbling at the apple tree, a veritable Garden of Eden from which I had exiled myself. "Yeah, I haven't booked my flight yet, but I will." "How about you do it before you go to bed tonight?" "I said I will." We talked about how I might decorate, where I'd put the big lamp and the small sofa. There weren't many options. I'd brought her to see the apartment just after I'd put in the offer, and since I was already committed, she was uncharacteristically polite. Pinching her lips, she said, "Well, you could probably do something with it. Then, maybe you can rent it out as a vacation spot later." She'd minded her words, but hadn't bothered to disguise her tone. After we'd exhausted the back and forth about furniture over the phone, and I'd poured myself a suspiciously cloudy glass of water from the kitchen sink and announced I really was going to bed, she got around to saying what she really wanted to say. "Have you heard from him?" "Which one?" I said with a vague laugh. A pause. "Your husband, Natasha, obviously." She still referred to Joe in that austere way, as if she had a leg to stand on where relationships were concerned. "No, I haven't heard from Joe," I said, conversationally de-husbanding him, and his name hung between us for a second, like the crack of a whip. "Don't even tell me if you've heard from the other one," she said eventually. "I don't want to know. I'm just glad I never got a call from his parents."